Hello everyone, welcome. Welcome everybody. Can you hear me clearly? If you can hear me, please comment in the box below. Say hello, hi. Let us know if you can hear us. Yes? That's good. Thank you for confirming that. Where's everybody tuning in from today? Happy Sunday. Where is everybody tuning in from? What country, city? Let me know in the chat box below. I know a lot of people are going to be from Nigeria here too. Nigeria, I see with a flag, that's good. China, that's awesome. Sweden, that's good. I'm not sure if we've had anyone from Sweden before, so thanks for tuning in. Please invite a friend, eh? This is gonna be a good session for a lot of people. This is the year you come to Canada, so I want to make sure that everybody gets the information required so you can make it to Canada this year. So please invite somebody, your neighbor, your friend. We'll get started in a couple of minutes here. We got someone from Ghana, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about express entry. It's good. Nigerian living in Sweden, welcome. Sweden, it's probably really cold over there too, is it? The person living in Sweden, lucky. How cold is it over there usually in the winter? Is it as cold as Canada? Where is everybody tuning in from today? We got lots of people from Nigeria, Ghana, and it's good. All right. Let's get started. Welcome. My name is Best Agofure, Canadian Immigration Specialist at Tofino Immigration Consultant. As you know, today we're going to be talking about the Express Entry Program. This is a very important program for us, and I hope you learn a lot today. This video is going to be saved on our Instagram page. We'll try and put it on our YouTube page as well. But I asked 2 weeks ago if you guys had any questions, and some people sent in their questions. So we're going to be answering some of those questions today. But before, I know not everybody knows about the Express Entry Program. So I'm going to chat about that a little bit, and then I'm going to start taking questions. Okay? Does that work for everybody? Awesome. So let's get started. The guy from Sweden said it's very cold, and they came from Ukraine, which I assume is cold as well. So when you come to Canada, it's going to be very cold as well. So just be ready for that. It's going to be similar climate for you then, I guess. Depends on where you live. Vancouver is currently the only part of Canada that I believe is like the warmest, really. But everywhere else is just, you can go ahead and forget it. It's just cold. So let's talk about express entry, okay? So 2 weeks ago, we talked about study permits, yeah? And if you haven't watched that video, you can go back on our page and learn all about the study permit process for Canada. But today we're going to be focusing the express entry only, okay? But when we discussed the study permit, we talked about how that was a temporary program, right? And the officer, he's going to be reviewing your application and trying to determine if you're going to return back to your home country, because it is a temporary program, study permits, okay? Today we're going to talk about the express entry, which is a permanent program, permanent immigration program. It's under the economic class, right? So the officer is going to try and determine if you intend to come to Canada permanently, one, and two, if you're going to be economically established in Canada if you are a good candidate to become economically established in Canada. So this is a different level of test. If you take the temporary one, the officer wants to determine if you're going to return, and the officer wants to determine if you're going to live here permanently and if you can settle economically. Okay, so the two levels of test. I hope that makes sense so far. Okay, I know like during pandemic though, like Express Entry, we had not been inviting people a lot because every country was really struggling. So we closed our borders and we're just trying to figure stuff out right now. The program is probably going to come back live again in July. But first of all, I understand that a lot of people don't know about the Express Entry program, or they don't understand the Express Entry program. So I'm going to take it back and explain from there, if that's okay with you guys. So the intention of the program is where I'm going to start. So Canada is the second largest country in the world. Some of you know that there's Russia and then there's Canada in terms of land area, right? So Canada is pretty huge, but we don't have a lot of people. We only have about 37 million people in all of Canada, right? And a lot of us live by the border, the United States border. We live really close. So there's a lot of room. We need more people. But also Canada's population is aging. So a lot of workers that we have right now, they're retired or they're retiring. And they will need people to, of course, pass over this knowledge that they have to younger people so they continue to make the economy prosper, right? But also a big part of why this country thrives is because we have the infrastructure that supports a place like this, right? So Canada is a rich country, yes. So we need people to work so they can make a lot of money, so we can charge them for taxes, so we can continue to build the infrastructure and all the systems that we have. That's what makes Canada very attractive for a lot of people. You know, the healthcare, the free healthcare, the free education, all of that comes from taxpayers' money. So we need people that can come work and pay taxes so we can continue to be prosperous and make Canada very attractive. So that is the intention, to replace some of the Asian population. Okay, so now what kind of candidate you think will work for this sort of program, right? Obviously, it's somebody that can come here and adapt quickly, start working, and start to contribute to the economic prosperity of this country. Okay, so the Express Entry program, what is it? Express Entry is essentially like, think of it as an application system, right? Where we have programs on, if you think of it as an umbrella, and then we have programs under that umbrella, like pillars, right? So we have, for example, the Canadian Experience class is under Express Entry. We have the Skilled Trades program, which is under Express Entry, and we have the Federal Skilled Worker program. So we'll talk about the requirements really quickly. For the Canadian Experience class, it says it right there in the name, Canadian Experience. It means somebody who's lived here and worked here for a little bit, usually 12 months in total. And they have that work experience and the language skills and everything else to qualify under that program. For the Federal Skilled Trades program, this is people in the trades. So we're talking about electricians, plumbers, welders, usually in that category. And a lot of you don't qualify for that, so we're not going to spend any time on that at all. Now, we have the program which a lot of people qualify for, people living outside of Canada, that is, which is the Federal Skilled Worker program. And the Federal Skilled Worker program, the requirement is essentially to have 12 months of continuous work experience in a skilled occupation. Okay? Work experience in a skilled occupation that is paid, right? You have to be paid. It can't be volunteer work someplace. It has to be 12 months non-stop in a skilled occupation. Now, skilled occupation is essentially like what we consider to be something that is skilled. Now, I understand the way we classify this is called NOC, National Occupation Classification. So all the jobs that you could do in your country or any country, we put everything together and say, okay, well, where can we classify these jobs? Like, are you like a senior manager, for example? There's a different code for that. Are you just like a professional? There's a code for that. Are you like a chef or like a cook? There's a code for that. Are you like a cleaner, for example, or making beds at a hotel? There's a different code for that. So we classify these occupations based on the level of skill required to do the job. Okay. Now, I'm not saying somebody who is a cleaner is not valuable to our society. No. Okay? Any work is honorable. You need to know that. But under this particular program for express entry, which is an economic program, we have classified jobs based on what we need here right now. Okay? And we give them a code. And you can either fall under a class called class 0, like NOC 0, A, B, C, or D. And under the express entry program, what we require is NOC 0, A, B. Okay? 0, A, and B. Hope that makes sense. So this would be like professionals, like accountants, or any profession, teachers, like, but not like the ones under C and D. Okay? So that's the first thing. You need to be working for 12 months, non-stop at a minimum. Okay? It needs to be paid. You need to have good language skills. We'll get to that later. Okay? So the express entry system, think of it as it's a ranking system. So we invite people for permanent residency based on a score. So what usually happens is when you create a profile in this express entry system, we give you a score. Okay? We give you a score. And then we decide what the cutoff score is. And everybody that meets that cutoff score and above, we'll invite them to come to Canada as permanent residents. Okay? So if, take this water bottle for example, if this is the pool with all the candidates and the score here is say 450, everybody that has 450 and above will be invited for permanent residency. The people below will remain in the pool until the next draw. And we can decide to come down here, for example, on a score next time, and then we invite everybody here. So it really just depends on what the score is. You can be in the pool for 1 year, and then your profile just deletes. You can create a new one, of course. So what do you need actually to get into this pool? You need good language skills. For those of us that speak English, this could be the IELTS exam or the CELPIP exam. I know a lot of you contact me saying, can I come to Canada without writing the IELTS or writing the language exam? Again, the program is for skilled immigrants, right? We want to know that you can come to Canada and continue and immediately contribute to the economy, which means you need to be able to communicate with the language, right? English or French, it doesn't matter. But if you can't communicate, it will slow down your integration process into the workforce, right? So you can understand where Canada is coming from. Language skills is important. And somebody who is educated, of course, will get more points than somebody who's not educated. Somebody who speaks any of Canada's official languages really good is going to get more points than somebody who doesn't, right? And someone is asking if Duolingo is accepted. No, it is not accepted. It's going to be IELTS or CELPIP, okay? So you need to speak one of our languages, whichever one you're comfortable with. You need to have a good level of education, okay? You need to have work experience, at least 12 months, okay? And then you should be able to get into the pool. Now, Canada is like, these scores that you get in the express entry, they're going to be based on different factors that we consider important to us, okay? So, for example, age is important because the younger you are, the longer you can work. Retirement age here is about 65. So somebody who's coming here really young, like let's say at 29, they're going to work for a very long time before they actually retire, right? So it is more beneficial for Canada to say, hey, let's take the younger people over the people who are a little older. Makes sense? Okay. Education, the more educated you are, the more you can contribute to Canada. So, of course, if you have like a high school diploma, secondary school certificate, it is not as valuable as somebody who has a bachelor's degree. A bachelor's is not as valuable as somebody who has a master's, for example. So you can see it's like the points go higher, the more educated you are. Somebody who speaks English at a bare minimum level is not as valuable in points as somebody who has like has advanced skills, for example, right? So 1 year experience. I know in a lot of countries, it is quite difficult to get a job. Nigeria, for example, it's challenging to get a job. But what I know about Nigeria is when you're done school, you usually you have to serve the government for a year, NYSC experience, right? A lot of you having that NYSC experience for 1 year, that experience qualifies under express entry because NYSC is usually 12 months. They usually pay you for the year. It is not good money, I understand, but it's not about how much money they're paying you. It is, are you being paid? That's literally the requirement. Are you being paid? Is it a skilled occupation? A lot of people doing the NYSC 1 year experience, some of them are teachers, for example, valuable skill, okay? So a lot of you under the NYSC category, the 1 year experience you have to do after university already qualify, okay? So you need to write that IELTS exam and verify your credential. Anything you tell Canada you have, you need to prove it. For example, your age, we're going to tell your age with your passport, for example. If you say you're educated, you need to verify that degree. We need to be sure that you actually graduated. It is not about your GPA. A lot of people contact me, ask me about GPA, the scores they got when they graduated. That is not important. What is important is, do you have a degree? Answer is yes. Is this degree equivalent to a degree in Canada? The answer is yes. That's fine. So even if your GPA was like pretty low, I don't want you to worry about that. Okay? You just have to get your credentials evaluated as well. IELTS, this English exam everybody is afraid of, right? Because we've done a live on this before, IELTS. So check through our IGTV story on IELTS, tips to pass the exam. The exam is like, a lot of people just are afraid of it. Some people never even attempted the exam. I understand it's a little pricey, but you have to write that exam to get into the pool of candidates, right? So that's something to think about. Now, in terms of, someone was asking the other time about what score is ideal. Okay, so I'll tell you what an ideal candidate is, first of all, in terms of like points, right? So you can understand. We can invite people like at low points through something called a PMP, but also like on the express entry itself, based on your own merits, right there, we're looking at scores around 450 and above, 450 and above, right? That would be a good score, for example. Now, an ideal candidate, just giving you from a point of view, right? Somebody that has masters, 3 years work experience, and good English will be a good candidate in terms of points. Now, if your points are not high enough, how do you improve your scores? Again, like I said, we invite people based on a score. And if you don't meet that cutoff score, you don't get invited, right? If you meet the cutoff score, you get invited. So your job is to do your best to improve that score. There's different things that can help your scores improve. For example, if you have family in Canada, that can improve your scores, right? If you speak Canada's second language, English or French, if you speak both, your scores even go like a lot higher, right? If you have a lower score in English or French and you go back and you increase it to a certain level, your scores can also go higher. We talked about having a secondary school degree, a diploma, bachelor's, master's. The more educated you are, the more your points will get. But take that with a grain of salt, because why would you go back to school and spend a lot of years trying to get a PhD when you can do something else to increase your points that doesn't take as much time? Because the older you get, the more points you lose, right? So 29 and below gets the highest points. Once you hit 30, and every year after that, our birthday gift to you is points reduction. So you always want to be very creative on what to do so you can keep getting more points. Sometimes as well, when you have a profile, express entry profile, you could get lucky and get invited by a province, right? We don't have states here, we have provinces. So we have 10 provinces and 3 territories. And most of them have immigration programs as well that give you enough points to immigrate to Canada as well. But that's a topic for another day. But that could also give you extra points. If you get a job offer in Canada, that could also give you extra points. 1 point on job offers. Now, usually, again, this is just usually, because I know a lot of people have been defrauded in the past when it comes to job offers. I get emails all the time. I know how much these people lose all the time, in the millions, because somebody told them, I have a job offer for you. So you want to be very careful when it comes to job offers. For an employer to give you a job offer, usually they have to try and hire people here first, local people, Canadians, permanent residents. The employers need to try and do that and prove to the government that they tried to do that and they couldn't find anybody. Then they come hire you abroad. Now, for an employer to do that, come hire you from Ghana, from Nigeria, from wherever you are, you need to be pretty special, right? Because it might be easier for an employer to increase the salary here for somebody who already lives here to encourage them to work than to come all the way to Nigeria or to invite somebody from Nigeria and pay all these immigration fees and go through all of this immigration stress and try and hire you from Nigeria. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm not saying you're not pretty special either, but I'm saying those opportunities for jobs are very rare. So if somebody is telling you to pay X amount of money so you can come to Canada on a job offer, you want to be a little skeptical, right? You want to do all of your research. You want to be sure. If you're not sure, you can send us an email, book a consultation. Let us read through that job offer. Let us check it out for you, because people lose too much money and then they come to us later and they say, hey, this is what happened. And I'm from Nigeria originally, right? So I understand our culture is a little, how do I say it? It's like we keep things to ourselves. Like, it's superstitious, really. So we don't really tell people when we plan on immigrating anywhere. We only tell them when we arrive in Canada. When we get to the airport, that's when we call them back with this international number, this foreign number, to let them know we've gotten here. I understand that. Some people just are secretive that way. And I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to judge your culture or like your beliefs system. No, I'm just saying a lot of people also lose money, get defrauded in secret. They don't, because they didn't tell anybody. Nobody could advise them on that information that they got if the information is wrong, because you just kept it to yourself. And it is only after they've lost money and they get so pained. Some people lose all of their savings, right? This is when they reach out to people and say, hey, this is what actually happened. Or some don't even reach out because of shame, right? So if you can't talk to your family members, if you can't talk to a friend, if you can't talk to somebody who lives here, who's gone through this process before that you're sure of, maybe book a consultation with somebody who's licensed to determine if that's the pathway for you. But don't go ahead losing money and come back to me later and be sad. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. So back to what you need to create a profile. Essentially, you need a language exam. Okay? I'm going to go back and be clear and say you need language test. It could be CELPIP or IELTS, the general version, right? You need 12 months, uninterrupted 12 months of work experience in a skilled occupation. Okay? This occupation needs to be paid. You can't be working for free for anybody. It needs to be paid. And you need to have your credential, this being your degree or your diploma or your master's, evaluated. There's a company called World Educational Services, for example, that does evaluations. It's called an ECA. When you have those three, you can create an Express Entry profile. Now, a lot of people come in and say, well, my score is not very high. It's called a CRS score, Comprehensive Ranking System score, right? It's very low. It's in the 300s. I am not encouraged to create a profile. I would encourage everybody that is eligible for a profile to have one, okay? There's nothing wrong with you having a profile because you don't know when your miracle is going to come, right? A province might be interested in your profile and invite you and give you the extra points that you need. But it is better to have a profile than not have a profile, because you can just get lucky. You can never win a lottery if you don't play, if you don't buy a ticket, okay? So I would say you should always have a profile if you qualify for that, okay? Makes sense. So in terms of like when you create a profile, some people are like, how long does it take? As soon as I create a profile, do I come to Canada right away? So when you create a profile, it's called an expression of interest. You go online, you create a profile. Now you're in the pool of candidates with everybody else. You're making an interest, you're expressing an interest to Canada, saying, I am interested in immigrating here. And Canada gives you a score based on the factors we've just talked about: your age, level of education, work experience, language skills, and all of that stuff, right? They give you a score. And if you meet that score, you then get invited to apply, an ITA, invitation to apply. So you can remain in the pool for a week, for example, and Canada has a draw. If your score is right, you will get invited. You can remain in the pool for 11 months and not even hear back because your score never met the requirement, right? So no one can really tell you how long it's going to take from when you create a profile to when you get invited, because it really depends on the score that Canada is setting for that particular draw. Does that make sense so far? Comment in the chat box below. Let me know if that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, I can go back and explain it more. But it's a draw, right? And you need to have a good score for that to happen. When you get invited to apply and you submit all of your documents, now we can talk about processing time. They usually promise you take less than 6 months, and the program is express entry, but I'm not quite sure if it's express anymore because sometimes it just takes longer. But either way, it doesn't really matter how long it takes, as long as you make it to Canada someday. That's all you care about. It's going to take as long as it takes. Okay. All right. And one more thing you need to have in terms of profile. You don't need to have it right away. It's settlement funds. Okay. I'll touch more on that later when I start taking questions, but you need to have money to come to Canada. Okay. And I know a lot of people tell you different things, but you need money to immigrate. You're physically moving from a place that you know and love, right, to a foreign country where you possibly know nobody. You will need some money. It's going to take you time to find work. It's going to take you time to start making a stable income before you can settle. Some of you might need to switch careers, right? So there's different things to consider. But Canada is saying, look, we understand it's going to take you a while to get a job, so you need to bring some money with you. I mean, it's really fair if you ask me, okay? All right, so I'm going to start taking some questions. Again, for the past 2 weeks, we've been posting on our story, asking you guys to ask us questions that you want us to talk about today. Some of you did that, so I have a list of questions here that I have to go through first. I know a lot of y'all like asking questions there right now, but the people that ask questions first, we're going to get through that, and then if there's more time, we'll go through the questions that you guys have been asking on here. Fair is fair? Okay, let's get started. So the first question here, somebody was asking about processing time. I'm not going to spend too much time on that because I just talked about it here in the processing time. First, you need to create a profile. You can't ask about processing time if you don't even have a profile. So don't even bother, right? Once you have a profile and you meet a certain score, then you get invited to apply. Then you can think about processing time, which should be less than 6 months. But if you don't have a profile, just don't even think about it. Okay? All right. Somebody was asking if they could apply for a study permit while their wife is in the express entry pool. So this is like dual intent, because we talked about the intention of a study permit, you coming here temporarily, and you possibly even having, you or your wife possibly having an express entry profile. So one is a permanent intent and one is a temporary intent. The officers see this all the time. It's not illegal to do that. So you can apply for a study permit and you can also have an express entry profile. I would even encourage you to do that, right? With a study permit, study permits could get approved in like 3 months. So you can literally be in Canada like in 3 months. But if the express entry eventually works out for you, what would then happen is, even if you're going to school in Canada at the time and you become a permanent resident, your tuition is going to be significantly lower than what you would have been paying as an international student. I was an international student. I didn't even want to go through how much money I spent studying in Canada, but it's quite pricey, yeah? So if you get a chance to become a permanent resident, why not? Because it saves you a lot of money. So have the profile for express entry, apply for a study permit. It's all good. So I hope that clarifies that question there. Okay. Next question, it's actually from my friend David from Kenya. So he sent me a message over and he was talking about the advantages of selecting a particular province. Now, when you create your express entry profile, they're going to ask you which province you want to settle. All of the provinces are there. but there's also like a button that says you're interested in going to all provinces and territories, right? Why would I select one province when I can hit the checkbox that says all provinces and territories? So I advise you to hit all of them, and whoever invites you first, wonderful. Because sometimes, like I said, the province might like your profile and give you the points that you need to immigrate. Sometimes you have enough points that the federal government just gives you the points that you need. That might seem a bit confusing, so let me clarify. So immigration is a shared responsibility between the federal government and the provincial government. Again, provinces are like states. Some people in your country is a region. Here is provinces, territories. Those are like states, right? So because it's a shared responsibility, sometimes the government, the federal government, might just invite people based on a regular score, which is the express entry CRS score that they have. But the provinces really know what they need more than what the federal government needs. Like if you think of a country, there's a particular region in that country. They know they need farmers. They know they need like more like painters or whatever. They know what they need. So they go into the pool and search for what they need, and invite people based on that, because only the locals will know what they need more. Why the federal government wants to meet like a federal target and just invite people into Canada based on what they think Canada needs, the provinces still know what they need for sure. So the country said, Canada said, look, we're still going to invite people, but you can also invite people on your own and we'll support you. So the province can invite people based on a provincial nomination. That's what I meant by the nomination. So the provinces will nominate you for permanent residency. You go through the process, and then Canada will still go through their medical test, for example, and still go through the criminal background check, for example. But the provinces can also invite you. This is what we call provincial nomination. Okay, so I hope that clarifies. But if you create your profile, as I was saying before, select all provinces and territories, because you could just get lucky. You never know. Okay. Our next question is how long after expression of interest to get an ITA? Just talked about that. We strive for less than 6 months, but who are we kidding? Sometimes it will be less, sometimes it will be more. There's so many factors now that affect processing times. We don't want to get into how long it takes. What matters is at some point you make it to Canada and you start to live the life that you want to live here. Okay. Everything making sense so far? How are you guys doing so far? Are you having a good time? Is this making sense? Is this helpful so far? Please comment in the chat box below. Let us know so we can know how we're doing. We're still good on time. We got about less than 30 minutes to go. I'll go through all the questions. I'm hoping I'll be able to get through the questions. Next question. Someone was asking if your points drop when you get to 30 years old. I already addressed this before. I said once you hit 30, birthday gift to you every year is a point reduction, 5 points. You keep dropping 5 points every year. So the earlier you start the process, the better. And some people are just waiting for the perfect time. There is no perfect time. As the older you get, the more points you lose. So you might as well start today, right? I don't like people living in regrets either, saying, oh, I'm already 46. I should have started this like forever ago. I don't know. I'm just not hopeful. You need to have a profile. If you qualify, take a shot. You will never win the lottery if you don't play. I will still say create a profile, because you just never know. I've seen miracles in this pool before. Okay, so always have a profile. You just never know. Somebody was asking about settlement funds, the amount of money you need for a family of 2. So Canada expects you to have enough money to take care of your expenses for a period of 6 months, because they expect that 6 months is enough time for you to get a job, right? And that will be fair. Most people can get jobs within 6 months or less, but you need to have this money to take care of yourself when you get here, and you must have this money. This is a requirement, so you can't even fool around this stuff. Okay, this money can be a gift to you. It could be from your savings, but you need to have this money. If the money randomly just shows up in your account, the person that, however you get that money, you need to show how you got it. If it's a gift from your dad, for example, your dad might need to write a letter and say, hey, I gifted this money to my child, and it's a gift, and it's not a loan. It's not going to pay it back. The idea is we don't want this to be a loan. You don't want to immigrate to a new country and be owing money back home. Canada doesn't want that because that makes you stressed. That takes you forever to settle in because you keep thinking about this debt that you owe back home. So it needs to be money that is not a debt. It is your money and you have access to the money and you come to Canada. So for a family of one, it's about $13,200. For a family of two, it's about $16,400 and something. If you add $4,000 per person, you should be around the ballpark number that you need. But the bigger the family, the more money you need. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Somebody was asking if they should focus on the study route instead of express entry due to the processing time. I believe I already kind of addressed this before, but you can apply for school, apply for a study permit, and still have an express entry profile. If I were you, I'll be doing both, honestly, because you just never know which one is going to work out. Because let me ask you a question, like, what happens if your study permit is unapproved? Because it happens from a lot of African countries, study permits acceptance rate is not very high. So if your study permit is unapproved, then what are you going to do, right? So always have an express entry profile as a backup plan or as a first plan. Doesn't really matter, but have a profile if you qualify. Okay, someone was asking if you need an agent. By agent, I don't know if you mean agents or consultants because they're different. But immigration is designed in a way that you don't really need anyone, okay? And let me be clear. You don't need anyone to help you with your immigration. You can choose to hire us. You can choose not to hire us. It doesn't matter. If you understand it properly and you think you're not going to make any mistakes and everything is fine, you can go ahead and do it yourself. You don't, how do I say this? You don't get any special favors because you hired an immigration firm. No, there's no special favors for you. Our job is to make sure we represent you in the best way possible. But it doesn't mean the officer is going to look at it and say, oh, he used a consultant, so we're going to prioritize this application. No, if you understand it and you can do it yourself, wonderful. If you need help from us, wonderful. Okay, so I hope that clarifies that part. But now, when you're creating your profile, if you out there just playing around and you don't know what you're doing, I'll say seek help, because if you make a big mistake and you lie to the officer, even if you didn't need to lie, that's called misrepresentation. That gets you banned for 5 years. So if you were 29 or you just turned 30, by the time you're done, you would have lost at least 35 points, which is significant, right? So you want to be careful not to make a big mistake that gets you banned for 5 years, okay? So do you need a consultant or an agent or whatever you want to call it? No. Should you? I recommend it, because you know what? If you're going to have a tattoo, for example, you can get your friend to draw it for you, or you can go to a tattoo parlor, right? And get the help that you need. All right. Someone was asking if they're able to create a profile right away. Well, if you're asking this question, I'm not sure if you are able to create a profile right away. You need the documents to create a profile. You need to have done certain things to have a profile. For example, you need to get your credentials from school evaluated, right? You need to have taken the language exam. If you don't have those two, you can't create a profile. If you don't have the 12 months experience, you can't have a profile. So it really just depends on your unique situation. But those are usually the things that you need so you can have a profile, okay? Somebody was saying they were 32 years old and they're going for a 1-year master's. Would they qualify for express entry? Again, express entry isn't about going for a 1-year master's. No, it's about you being able to speak English or French to a certain level, having an education already, like a bachelor's, for example, and getting that verified, evaluated, and having 12 months minimum work experience. You can create a profile then for most people. It's not about you coming to Canada for 1 year. No, it's about you meeting the requirements for the Federal Skilled Worker Program if you're outside of Canada. Okay, 1-year masters, I don't like them very much. Okay, just on a side note, 2 weeks ago I did one of these sessions on study permit applications. For those of you who are interested in study permits, go back and watch that and learn about study permits, because this is about express entry. But when you apply for a 1-year master's, your work permit, when you graduate, called a postgraduate work permit, it's going to be for 1 year, which puts you in a very tight spot because you may not have enough time on that permit to become a permanent resident. Okay, Go back and watch that video on study permits from 2 weeks ago and learn all about that. I don't want to spend any time on that here because this is for express entry. But be careful with one-year programs, essentially what I'm trying to say, because it might not be too good for you either, okay? So, someone was asking if people from Zimbabwe can apply. People from any country can apply, as long as you meet the requirement. So go back and look at the requirements properly. 12 months work experience, usually, okay? ECA, Education Credential Assessment, you need to verify your degree that you got. It's not about your GPA, you need to verify it. Language skills, okay? Then you should be able to have a profile. If you need help with express entry, you can always book a consultation with us. We're always happy to chat with you and help you through the process. By the way, we started a podcast not too long ago where we're talking about life in Canada, because I know all of you here are interested in immigrating to Canada, but you also need to settle into Canada when you arrive, and life here might be different from where you're coming from. So check out the podcast so you can learn a lot about life in Canada before you even get here. Podcast is called Canada Awaits You. It's on Spotify, it's on Google Podcasts, it's on Apple Podcast. It's also on the podcast website, CanadaAwaitsYou.com. So check it out, listen to the episodes we have so far. If you want us to talk about anything on our podcast, also send us a message. Most likely we will talk about it in the future as well. So, but follow, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your neighbors, so you can learn about Canada before you get here, okay? So there's this strategy for express entry that I like very much. I'm going to talk about it for a couple of minutes because it's an extreme strategy. I get it, because when I propose it to people, they're like, what? But okay. So I'll give you two scenarios based on points, okay? So for somebody who has a master's program, we're going to focus on master's, and the person is 29 years old, so they've not lost any points for age. 3 years experience, master's, good English score, like CLB 9, which is like high, they will get 469, okay, on the scale. So we invite people around 450, for example. So this person would have met the requirement because it would be an ideal candidate for express entry scores. But somebody who only has a bachelor's, not master's, bachelor's, same 3 years experience, they speak English and they speak French, okay, to a good level, they'll be at 491, okay, not a master's, a bachelor's, but they speak French, 491. You got a master's and you're 469. So what does that tell you? French gives you a significant advantage. If you were getting older and you say, I want to go spend 2 more years and get a master's, and I know Nigerians, for example, they love school a lot, so they want to go back and do a PhD too, that will be a waste of time, in my opinion, because you can simply learn French for 1 year and even get more points than somebody who did a master's, right? So it would make sense to learn French for 9 months. That is what I would do. But people are different and people have like different priorities. It's really about how bad you want it, right? And also French would open up different doors for you too, because there's provincial nominations, there's provinces that welcome people that speak French, like Ontario, for example. You speak French, you may be eligible for a nomination, right? New Brunswick, which is a bilingual province, you may be eligible for a nomination. So if I were you, I would rather, if you come to Canada, do master's 2 years, if your tuition is $20,000 a year, that's $40,000 to come study master's in Canada. But you can take $1,000 and learn French wherever you live and still achieve the same goal. It really depends on, you know, how much money you have and what you're trying to do and your timelines and your priorities and all that stuff. But French opens doors if that's something you aim to, okay? So I hope that makes sense. Let me see some of the questions that you guys have been asking here so far, and let's see if there's anyone. Someone was asking how they can verify their credentials. So there's different companies that do this, but one of them off the top of my head is called WES, World Educational Services, okay? So check their website and you should be able to learn how to verify your credentials on that website. You want to get something called an ECA for Canada, Educational Credential Assessment. You need that. When you get it, it will be valid for 5 years. So you should start today, okay? Next. Someone's asking if they can apply for a work permit from outside Canada while waiting for a decision to be made on your PR. Well, the work permits, usually you need a job offer. If you have a job offer, you can apply for that. If you don't have a job offer, chances are you can't apply for work. Depends on your country of origin, but if you, from most African countries, for example, you really can't apply for a work permit. I'll just wait for the PR if I were you. Can I elaborate on CEC, Canadian Experience Class, for those of you who are wondering? So like I said, Express Entries, think of it as an umbrella with 3 programs under it. There's a Canadian Experience Class, the Federal Skilled Trade Program, Federal Skilled Worker Program. Canadian Experience Class is for people who have Canadian experience, who live here. They usually get more points than people who are foreigners, right? But essentially you need 12 months experience just like everybody else, okay? You don't need settlement funds. There's just minute details between both programs, and your 12 months experience doesn't need to be like continuous. But if you live in Canada already, this might be a program for you. But chances are if you live in Canada, you most likely understand the Express Entry program. I'm really spending a lot of time today on the Federal Skilled Worker program because lots of people tuning in are from outside of Canada, and this is the only program that will make more sense to them, okay? Let me see if I can take some more questions here. Can I reapply when my first study permit is denied? This session is for Express Entry, not study permits. Go back to the one we did 2 weeks ago on study permits, and that would answer your question. Okay. Someone was asking how they can create a profile. If you go to the Canada's website, Canada Immigration, and you say create an Express Entry profile, it would guide you through it. You can do it yourself. If you need assistance on creating your profile, you can contact us. We also have a service, by the way, that of course we can help you create your profile and apply for Express Entry for you and all that stuff. But if you got an invitation, for example, from the government, and you need somebody to take a look at your application to make sure it's complete and it meets all of Canada's requirements, you can reach out to us. We can do a review for you to make sure it does that. And that will be a different price point, obviously, than we doing all of the work for you. Okay. Let's see. Can one learn, I believe that's French. Oh, can somebody learn French between 5 to 6 months? And can you recommend any French schools in Nigeria? Learning language depends on you, right? Like how much work you want to put in and how much effort you want to put in. It really just depends. A good school though in Nigeria would be the Alliance Française. They're all over the world really, but they also have offices in Nigeria. There's one in Victoria Island, I believe, the Mike Adenuga Center. I was just there a few months ago, and I know they have really good French programs as well. But learning a language takes dedication, right? Try and be listening to things in French, for example, kids' stories, read kids' books, like start somewhere, right? But ideally, it takes 9 months. It took me 9 months. So I speak French and I speak some Spanish. So I know how long it took me. For French, it took me 9 months, but I know people that it takes less than that. I know people that have been learning French since high school and they still don't speak French. It depends on your dedication. So I hope that clarifies a little bit. If you're asking questions, ask questions in the questions box, because I know a lot of you are trying to somebody asked actually if, this is one of the questions that were asked before, if they can come to Canada and become an electrical engineer immediately. You can be anything you want in Canada, but a lot of professions here are highly regulated, okay? So you will need to go through the process of getting your engineering degree and license recognized here, or have to write certain exams to get that in Canada. Because, okay, if you were a nurse, for example, in Nigeria, you would think you just come to Canada and be a nurse. If you were a teacher, you would think you just come to Canada and be a teacher, right? Not true. The curriculum is different, first of all, right? So we don't know what a teacher was teaching in Nigeria or the methods they were using to teach in Nigeria. Like when I was a kid and I was in school, for example, if we didn't understand something, I know the teacher can just crack up a whip and just whip you so you can get it. That is one way of teaching, for example. We don't do that here. You go to jail. So we need to really understand what you know and try and like do a bridge between what you know and how we teach here, and so you can get our own licenses as well. A lot of professions here are regulated. Yes, we will let you come into Canada, but that does not mean you will be practicing in that profession immediately. There are usually steps you need to take, but this session is not about that. This session is about getting you to Canada first, because a lot of you worry too much about like what you're going to do when you come to Canada. When you get to that bridge, you will cross that bridge. First is because if you think of everything at the same time, you get overwhelmed and you don't even take any action at all. Okay? Action is key. You need to go through the process. Take the English exam first, right? Verify your credentials, have a profile. That is step one. Focus on that. That's where you are right now. If you get an invitation and you start processing that, then maybe get a career coach, like a mentor, right? We know a few of those people. We can always recommend people for you that can help you with your career choices when you immigrate here. And some people are so keen on doing exactly what they were doing in their home countries. You don't want to do that. You want to have an open mind. For example, a client contacted me saying they're a banker in Nigeria, chartered accountant. They love it so much and they've gotten so many awards in Nigeria. What if when you get to Canada, banking doesn't pay you money as much as you think, right? What if there's other types of careers that you should focus on that helps put food on the table for you and your family? Like if you could make $100,000 and you were making $50,000, you're just robbing your family of an extra $50,000 that they could have gotten, right? So let us change our mindsets when we want to immigrate here and not just say, I have to do exactly the same thing. Keep an open mind, and I hope that helps a little bit. Okay, so we already answered this one. Let's see. Do we help with recruitments? Someone's asking for help with recruitments. No, we do not recruit for you. You have to kind of look for a job. But I would say getting a job offer from Nigeria, it's a little challenging, okay? And a lot of people get defrauded that way. So I would say create an express entry profile and do that. Someone's asking, can I know the kind of sickness the clinic will check? Well, they'll check. So what they're checking for essentially is if whatever you have is going to be a burden to our healthcare system here, because our healthcare system here is free, right? So, I mean, and it's usually like a certain dollar threshold to the illness or the condition, whatever it is, right? So if your condition is going to cross that financial maximum that Canada has set, then you would be inadmissible to come to Canada, okay? If it's less than that, then Canada will still accept you. Only the doctor and your recommendations to Canada would really determine if you're going to be a burden. So off the top of my head, I can't say, oh, if you have this particular illness or this condition, then you can't come to Canada. I would still say try, right? The doctor is going to do their check. They're going to send it to Canada. Canada is going to take a look and say, okay, well, if they can handle it or not. I don't like people just not taking action if it's possible to take. So don't get discouraged. Whatever the condition is, I would still create a profile, and only Canada and the doctors, and depending on how advanced the condition is or how critical it is or whatever, that's a lot of factors go into it. So I'll still create a profile if I were you. I don't want to get discouraged, okay? This has been helpful so far. Comment in the chat box below. Let us know. We got about 5 minutes left, so I want to try and make the best of it. Somebody was asking, they finished a master's in the UK, can they still apply to study nursing in Canada? I would say look at the study permit live that we did 2 weeks ago. If it's about study, just check that one out, and it would really answer your questions there. Let me see if there's anything else that I'd like to touch on. Okay. As an international student currently in Canada, do you advise I finish my studies and apply through the CEC, or do I create a profile now? Well, I don't know what level of education you're studying in Canada. For example, some people have done a bachelor's in their home country. Say Nigeria, for example, you have a bachelor's, but you're in Canada now doing a master's. Currently, your highest education level is the bachelor's from Nigeria. If you want to be in the express entry profile today and you have work experience from Nigeria, you still qualify under the federal skilled worker, so you can evaluate your bachelor's from Nigeria and use your work experience from Nigeria to get into the pool. But while you're a student in Canada, your work experience does not count until you graduate, right? So you don't qualify under the Canadian experience class until you're done school. So you have to wait till you graduate, get a work permit that allows you to work after you graduate, get that 12 months work experience in Canada, then you can apply for the Canadian experience class. So the two separate programs, as you can see, right? All under express entry, but at different pathways. So I would say you should think of it that way. But after you graduate, of course, your points are going to go higher and you'll be a really good candidate to immigrate to Canada permanently. So I'll say think of it that way. So a few takeaways, okay? If you're not following us right now on our page here on Instagram, please do share with your friends, share with your family. That is how we grow our community. That is how people can learn about how to immigrate to Canada. I want a lot of you to come to Canada this year. So if anything, I hope this helps put things in perspective. But try and share our content with your friends so they can learn more as well. So everybody is a winner, right? So you're winning, your friends are winning. Because you don't want to be here and be sending money back home every month to your friends and your family. If everybody's here, then everybody's happy. Also, our podcast is now live on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. It is called Canada Awaits You. It's really for people like you that are thinking of immigrating to Canada and you want to learn about life in Canada for the immigrant. So check it out, leave your feedback, send us a message if you want us to talk about certain topics that you want us to talk about. I hope this session on Express Entry has been helpful. We're going to be saving it on IGTV here, possibly on our YouTube channel as well. But it's always going to be here, so share with your friends. Watch it again if there's something that we want us to talk about. We can always schedule new Instagram lives in the future as well. Was this helpful for everybody? Did you guys have a good time? Did you learn a little bit, a thing or two? Are you encouraged to create your Express Entry profile now? Because in July, we've not had a draw for a while. In July, the government is going to start, hopefully, inviting people again. And you want to be ready when the opportunity comes, right? You want to be ready, so you don't want to not be ready. The reason being is like Matthew 25, right? I'm a Christian, obviously, but I'm not an expert on the Bible. But there's a story there about like 10 virgins and 5 were ready and 5 were not, right? You want to be the ones that were ready for the opportunity when it comes, right? So check it out, create a profile. If you need assistance with that, contact us. My name is Best Agofure, Canadian Immigration Specialist at Tofino Immigration Consulting. At Tofino Immigration, we help make Canada your new home. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, Canada awaits you. Have a good day.